Most people, given unlimited power, become someone else. The throne changes them, the money changes them, the title changes them. Marcus Aurelius had all three and didn't change at all. That's not an accident, that's a system. History is a long record of men who wanted power and were destroyed by it. Caligula inherited the Roman Empire at 24 and descended into cruelty within months. Nero began his reign with promise and ended it in paranoia and murder. Even Caesar, brilliant, disciplined, strategic, couldn't resist the pull of becoming something more than a man. Power doesn't corrupt slowly, it corrupts the moment you believe you deserve it. And that belief doesn't arrive as ambition, it arrives as certainty. The certainty that your judgment is sound, that your decisions don't need questioning, that the people around you are there to execute, not to challenge. And that belief spreads quietly. It enters through praise, through obedience, through the way people stop disagreeing with you, through the silence of rooms that once had argument in them. This is the trap every powerful person falls into, and almost none escape. The question isn't whether power will test you, it's whether you'll have built anything to hold against it. Marcus Aurelius became Emperor of Rome in 161 AD. He did not want the position. He had been groomed for it since childhood, adopted into the imperial line, trained by the finest minds of the ancient world, handed more responsibility with every decade. But he understood, perhaps better than anyone before him, what power did to a person. He ruled for 19 years. He commanded the largest empire on earth. He had the authority to execute anyone, elevate anyone, take anything. And for 19 years he wrote privately about his own failures, not his enemies' failures, not his subjects' failures, his own. Those private writings, never intended for publication, became the meditations, and they reveal a man in constant quiet battle, not against armies but against himself. That is what separates him from every other emperor Rome ever had. The Stoics had a concept Marcus returned to again and again. They called it the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the part of the mind that directs everything else. Reason, judgment, the inner governor. Marcus believed that the external world, titles, wealth, armies, the approval of 1 million citizens, had no power over the hegemonikon unless you gave it that power. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This was not a passive idea. It was not resignation. It was the most aggressive act a man of power could perform. The deliberate refusal to let circumstance define character. Every morning Marcus reminded himself of what he was. Not an emperor, a man. Subject to error, subject to arrogance, subject to the slow rot that flattery produces. He practiced what the Stoics called negative visualization, imagining loss, imagining failure, imagining death, not to become pessimistic but to stay calibrated. The application: begin each morning by identifying one way you might be deceiving yourself about your own importance. Not self-deprecation, calibration. Marcus built a set of internal disciplines that held him in place regardless of what the world offered him. Not rules imposed from outside, rules he imposed on himself. Discipline 1. Seek criticism, not praise. Marcus surrounded himself with people willing to correct him. His tutor Fronto, the philosopher Rusticus. He wrote about this explicitly. The man who cannot hear criticism has already begun to decay. He actively requested honest assessment, and he recorded his own misjudgments in the meditations with clinical precision. The application: identify one person in your life whose honest criticism you currently avoid. Seek their input this week on something that matters. Discipline 2. Separate role from identity. Marcus understood that emperor was a function, not a self. He wore the title the way a soldier wears armour, usefully, but removably. When the armour came off, the man beneath had to remain intact. He wrote about this repeatedly. The role demands performance, but the soul demands honesty. The application: write down the titles or roles you currently hold. Then write down who you are without any of them. If that second list is empty, that's the problem. Discipline. 3. Return to first principles daily. The meditations are not a finished philosophy, they are a daily practice. Marcus wrote not to record insight, but to re-anchor himself. The same ideas appear again and again, not because he forgot them, but because power and comfort and routine erode conviction, and conviction must be rebuilt every morning. The application: choose one core belief about how you want to behave, who you want to be, and write it down every single morning for 30 days. Not to read it, to rebuild it. Discipline. 4. Act without audience. Marcus made decisions in private that he never needed to publicize. He showed mercy to enemies when cruelty would have been easier and more popular. He declined triumphs he had earned. He reduced the spectacle of the court without explaining himself. Virtue for him was not a performance. It was a private act, repeated until it became structure. The application: do something genuinely good this week that no one will ever know you did. Notice how it feels? That feeling is the difference between character and reputation. Discipline. 5. Remember your mortality, more specifically. Marcus did not speak about death in abstract terms, he wrote it plainly. Emperors are dust. Hadrian, who came before him, is gone. Augustus, who built the empire, is gone. All the men who seem permanent, gone. He used this not to despair, but to clarify. When everything ends, the question becomes, what was worth doing? The application: ask yourself once a week, if this were my last year, would I spend it the way I'm spending it now? The true measure of any system is not how it performs in peace, it's how it holds under pressure. Marcus Aurelius ruled during the Antonine Plague, a pandemic that killed 5 million people across the empire. He ruled during the Marcomannic Wars, brutal campaigns on the northern frontier that lasted over a decade. He faced military betrayal, political conspiracy, and the slow erosion of the empire's eastern borders. In 175 AD, one of his most trusted generals, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor and launched a rebellion. A lesser man would have responded with fury and a purge. Marcus responded with a letter. He wrote to the Senate asking them not to execute Cassius's supporters. He reportedly said he wished Cassius were still alive, so he could have the chance to show him mercy in person. Cassius was killed before Marcus could reach him, but the response, measured, principled, without the need for spectacle, told the empire exactly who was governing them. That is not natural temperament. That is a trained system holding under maximum pressure. 3 things to take from Marcus Aurelius. First, power reveals character. It does not build it. The person you are before the promotion, before the title, before the money, that is the person who will govern when they arrive. Build that person now. Second, discipline is not punishment. It is the architecture of a self that does not collapse when the world offers it an excuse to. Third, the inner life is the only life you actually control. Everything outside it is weather. You do not argue with weather. You prepare for it. The challenge Marcus left, not in his public speeches, but in his private pages, is this: would you behave the same way if no one was watching? If the answer is no, that's where the work begins. If these ideas move something in you, subscribe to the Wiser Age. Every week, one ancient lesson, and exactly how to use it.